Hi everybody. Today I'm joined by Dr. Neil Langridge from the MACP, and he's going to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his journey with the MACP to date. Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I'm currently a director for clinical and rehabilitation services at a health sciences university. I still remain in practice in physiotherapy. My background is that prior to that was 27 years in the health service, working across musculoskeletal practice up to consultant practitioner, which I completed for 10 years in a large community trust covering and leading the advanced practice multi-professional service in the interface and the rehabilitation side of all the musculoskeletal areas within physiotherapy, podiatry, occupational therapy, and some of our GP colleagues. I've been involved in primary care, secondary care, and community services over that period of time. And I became an MACP member in 2001, starting my MACP course in 1999. I've been on the executive committee on 2 occasions. This is my second period in office, and I've been back with the executive since 2020.
In terms of sharing your thoughts on the value of the journey to becoming a member and remaining a member, can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so if I go back to when I qualified in 1995, and it was, I remember it distinctly, it was on my appraisal in my first year of practice to work towards a master's degree and MACP membership. And the reason for that, I was taught as an undergraduate by an MACP member. I had the real value of having a one-to-one placement for my musculoskeletal, at that time was a spinal placement, with an MACP member who literally took the 4 weeks off to mentor me. I was incredibly blessed and really inspired by that individual's explanations. It was their real structural approach to clinical practice, their patient management, their patient care, but also it was the critical thinking and the challenge that I had as a third-year undergraduate. And it set me in a really good place for when I started into practice as a registered professional. So at that point, I felt that I wanted to, as many cases you aspire when you're inspired. So essentially, that's where that came from. I've maintained the membership due to the real gift of community of practice. When you work your way up through every stage in your career, you're looking for peer support internally and externally. And what I found was that community of practice was really valuable. I was able to reach out, connect with people on a regular basis, and taking that forward was really important at times, because there are certain parts of the job where you could feel a bit isolated. Particularly if I take my consultant role, that was difficult to always get peer support. We had a consultant level of practice group within the CSP, but essentially much of my peer support and challenges came from my connections and communications within the MACP and the executive at that time. So I found it incredibly valuable in that respect. And the second part was keeping contemporary about what's going on nationally. And as a consultant practitioner, you need to make sure that you're up to speed with all your 4 pillars. And so leadership is one that is quite challenged, and you need to be working regionally and nationally if at all possible. And working within the MACP executive gives you that connections and gives you that place at the table to really build relationships at a national level. And that's what I took a lot of value from.
And with that, you're now moving into a newer phase with the MACP. Can you share any thoughts on where you want to take things, or your kind of view of the future?
So I'm a strong believer in partnerships. I'm a strong believer in internal partnerships within the MACP and its physiotherapy partners, but I'm a real strong believer in the multi-professional partnerships. Now that wraps around the patient, and what I've started to see a lot more of is how partnership working can really start to influence regionally and nationally. working in silos or working as individual organizations, internally facing, doesn't actually create change. It creates a continuum whereby we can maintain things and look after members, but if we really want to step forward into new spaces and really develop what we're trying to do, which is a vision for musculoskeletal health, to improve the musculoskeletal health of the population, the only way we're going to influence that is through partnership and community of practice working. So that's across the private sector, across the public sector, within patient groups, within other professional networks. It's can we work together, can we help, and what can we actually collaborate on rather than what we can do individually.
Fantastic. Thanks for taking the few minutes to tell us more about your experience and plans for the future. Have you anything before we finish that you wanted to say, either to maybe aspiring members or members who've been members for a long time, perhaps?
I think just from my own personal perspective, and this goes back to when I first qualified and when I was also involved in primary care, I was always of the mind I wanted to have a justifiable reason for my own professional existence in terms of standards. That's just my personal view, and that may be linked to imposter syndrome, but I needed something to hold my hat on. Saying I was experienced or I was long in the tooth or I'd seen a lot of patients was never enough for me. So I needed some sort of external validation. Similarly, against medical colleagues who go through a rigorous exam process to move through their career. One thing that I was able to attain at an early stage through gaining MACP membership and then being able to, and then maintaining that as a contemporary measure, was a justification for my clinical skills. Now, there's loads of other reasons to justify clinical skills, and I'm not saying it's the only one, but what it did give me, it gave me some external validation against my job title. And that helped me with imposter syndrome.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Neil, for taking the time. We'll stop the recording now.
Not at all.